I think for most people, the answer is like, you don't really need an AI security vendor. Really on the growth curve, right? Where it's like it goes back to why the practitioner survey was just like, would you use an AI vendor? Maybe. And then the other question that was on there that was super interesting was, is AI the top security concern for this year? There was one yes to that question. Everyone else said no.
Welcome to Season 4 of The Elephant in AppSec, the podcast to explore, challenge, and boldly face the AppSec elephants in the room. I'm Alexandra, your host, AppSec enthusiast, and growth manager at Escape. Today's episode features none other than James Berthoty, a security engineer turned founder and CEO of Latio. James is always ready to share his unfiltered opinions, and I've had the pleasure of chatting with him for the last couple of years. Over the past few months, there were a lot of discussions about AI security, and I invited him on the show before his new report even hit the public to discuss his thoughts on this very hot topic. In today's conversation, James unpacks why we are seeing an executive push for AI solutions and why practitioners should proceed with caution. He also shares why most people probably don't need an AI security vendor and some stories about the pushback he received after publishing his report. Plus, we'll talk about why we as an industry need to stay grounded in our approach to AI and security. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. It's the best way to avoid missing future episodes. And with that, get ready to hear James' opinions. Dive right in! Hi, James. I'm super excited to have you again on the Elephant and AppSec podcast, opening this new fourth, I think, season at this point. So it's the first time one of the guests is appearing, actually the second time. And the episodes we filmed together on the ASPM was one of the more on the podcast. So I think probably the topic was timely and it always resonates with a lot of people, both on the AppSec and on the vendor side. So people are just curious, to also know your opinions on this topic. And recently, also released a new report on AI security, which is also like hot topic right now. It was all over the RSA conference.
It's like a very annoying thing that it's so hot because we didn't solve like any of the other problems. Like the ASPM stuff, the vulnerability stuff, reachability, like all of those things are still very essential to solve. But what's hard is like the executive push towards AI is just insane. And so it's really distracting from just about every other security concern right now. And so that's why I wanted to get a report out on it, just to try to provide some guidance to people around. Very similar to ASPM, like there were people taking this vulnerability management approach, people taking this like all-in-one scanning approach, and just trying to tell people like, here's who's doing what and why it is important or not for different solutions. And that's really the goal with the AI report, was just to let people know here's different approaches that people are taking so that you can at least make an informed decision beyond everyone's AI generated landing page that says we do AI security.
Yeah, I think it is pushed a lot from the executive point of view because a lot of AI security companies also are selling to CISOs. At least that's what I see on the market. They're not selling as much as to AppSec or product security engineers, but they're really pushing the CISOs, and then it goes kind of top down. And also on the other side, it's the investors, to be honest. Like you get a lot of feedback. Like if you don't mention AI on your landing page, as you mentioned, you're no longer relevant, which is like there is still algorithm, that's developed, but it's in the end, at least in my opinion, it's more about the end goal and solving the problems that are still there. And AI is kind of mean to an end, That's why it's a little bit the problem that the market that's being kind of pushed on both on the vendor side and the security side to gear towards that. Did you feel like, and at least I know some engineers, even feel turned off when the vendor is like have AI labeled features? How do you think we should maybe find a good balance there?
Yeah, I think it's more just that practitioners like don't really care that much. Like to me, where it breaks down is when people will use AI as a standalone selling feature to say, we use AI, therefore buy our product. That doesn't resonate with anyone. People are open to the idea of AI improving pieces of the workflow or optimizing their life or doing things better, but it needs to be better than introducing Escapee, the Escape chatbot experience with our AI agent, like everyone is doing, because it's just unclear why that's necessarily that helpful. And I'm starting to see some little things that are getting closer to helpful. And that's why so the report, the part that a lot of people really, most of the report was about how to do AI security and what developments are for securing AI. But I also wanted to highlight people who are doing new startups that are built from the ground up for AI versus people who are innovating with AI in different ways. But that really was more supposed to be like a representative sample of what's out there than a complete surveying of the landscape. Because if that was a report, if I was to do a report on how vendors are using AI, it would just be every single logo and vendor that exists because everyone is building AI stuff and including it in their story. And so that piece of the report was more just supposed to be representative so that both vendors and practitioners could get an idea of what are some AI native approaches that people are taking and what are some innovations that are happening. But I think some people really took it as like some endorsement that I think you should go buy. To your point, if I'm a practitioner, I don't, someone having an AI thing really does not do much for me.
What feedback did you have from the practitioners on the report?
Yeah, I think
I imagine, from vendors, you did have a lot of feedback.
yes, the universal feedback from vendors is very funny because it's all of a sudden I am paid to play if their logo's not there. And then the people who did not pay and their logo was there were just happy. So it's a very hilarious development on that side. But really, I mean, because if people read the report, which itself is a minority of people, because most people just look at the picture and then complain that their vendor logo is not in there and then move on. But again, the majority of the report was about how to secure AI, and practitioners found it very helpful for even just knowing what solutions are out there. Because in the research side of the report, the findings were almost universal as far as the survey results, where people are open to partnering with vendors for AI security, but there was almost no one that just said yes. Like, yes, I'm going to find a vendor for AI security. I think this is the disconnect that vendors find is they hear that there's this problem. We have to secure AI. CISOs are looking at it. Security teams are looking at it. And then they assume, oh, we're going to be the vendor for that. But there's not always a vendor. Just because a security team has a problem doesn't mean they're going to look for a vendor to solve it. That depends on like the size of the problem, how complicated it is to solve internally. And people are open to the idea of using vendors. They just don't even know what they would do because the field is so new. And so I think that's what practitioners found the most helpful is just putting some guardrails around here are the things that vendors can help with, and how useful or not that would be is going to be based on my organization. Like the split right now, this is another side complaint with reports, is I had to do this like unified section because there's a sense in which I'm functioning as a reporter in terms of like just telling people what products do. And so this is how Gartner ends up in the challenge they have is like take Zenity and Pillar. Like Zenity is very focused traditionally on no code DLP side solutions for like workforce security. Pillar's very focused on the application security side of the house. Both of these vendors, though, have technically features to cover the other areas. Like Zenity has an API gateway in order to do runtime security. It's just not where they focus. Pillar has a browser plugin. It's just not where they focus. But it means that I have to put them both in this same bucket. And it unfortunately drives the industry towards, oh, we need to make sure we cover both of these features. And it's not because customers are asking for the same vendor to cover both those features. It's because it's what their competitors are doing, and it's because it's like where the box shows up on the logos. And I find that super frustrating and annoying. But the goal of the report was to let people know, hey, these guys do technically do both of these things, but I'm not saying you should do that. Like, I think these are pretty distinctive functionalities. And again, this is all in the report, but then you go into the nobody reads the report type stuff. And yeah.
Don't you think sometimes it's a problem that we ourselves create in cybersecurity, actually building the specific categories that you should fit and like check boxes within the category that you should comply on, which is actually tied to the budget of cybersecurity companies, which are only by category. Like it's very, we see cases, that it's people purchases because they didn't have like the checkbox, but more often than not, it's all about, okay, can I fit it within that
Yeah.
specific category that's allocated for Q3 or Q4, whatever. And then if you don't have a checklist of the features, then there is a big problem. And it's more rare than not that organization has a very specific use case where they really, really need the solution. It happens, but I think sometimes it's more like the cybersecurity industry on its own problem Like what kind of categories, maybe for people who haven't actually, as you mentioned, read the report, what kind of categories do you see AI security converging into?
Yeah, it's pretty. There's two things here. The first is why I always tell people that I actually do work with to not build for analysts and to build for like clear customers and buyers, because otherwise this is how you end up in this problem where we're building CNAPs with like SAST, SCA, SaaS, I know SAST as in the code scanning, but then also SaaS as in software as a service security. Like trying to become this all-in-one thing just because competitors are doing it, therefore we have to do it. Like Lacework has a SAST, and so we need a SAST when nobody's using Lacework SAST, for example. And this is what creates the problem where the end user is the one who suffers because analysts and competitors are driving the market. And this happens because enterprises look for, especially like enterprise CISOs, they look for partners for technology adoption more than they look for specific feature functionalities. So they're looking at AI security vendors as who is my trusted partner for adoption of AI across our enterprise, so that I can go to this vendor and just trust that I can roll out ChatGPT usage for my employees, I can roll out Microsoft Copilot, and I can secure the AI agents that my developers are making. But from a technical standpoint, those two use cases have almost nothing to do with each other. And that's what creates the core problem where, for example, building a Microsoft Copilot AI security solution is very heavily focused on like employee permissions. Like, does this user have access to see this data? Or if they ask the chatbot, who's making more money than me in the company? God forbid anyone ever figure out salaries, but that's like top enterprise security concern. And so they're figuring that out. That use cases, it can't be more different than developer is trying to deploy agentic AI that connects to a user database table that surfaces their favorite flavors of ice cream or whatever. And so the problem is these solutions get bucketed together. But in general, the way I separate, to go to your second question about how is the landscape separated, then really you have focus on the DLP, enterprise browser, safe employee adoption of chat tooling. There's an interesting crossover here with like MCP server protection and IDEs for developers. This has always been a blind spot for security teams because developers always, the first thing they request is to turn off whatever MDM exists on their laptop because it's blocking them from whatever they're trying to do. And the same thing will happen here, but it's a checkbox sort of thing. And then you have the AI infrastructure side, which is more about trying to discover what's there. And I think that CSPM vendors especially have been good at adopting these feature sets pretty early, as far as just seeing what models are we using. Are we using Jupyter Notebooks? Are we using Airflow? Like what technologies are there? How are our ML pipelines getting built and deployed? And then the last category is like runtime application protection. And this category is super interesting to me because we were all like RASP is dead. Everyone, I'm okay saying that. Beyond the DAST is dead thing, I think is overblown, but RASP is very annoying because no one's going to instrument this thing into their application that then owns everything just to get security benefit out of it. But right now, that's how most AI application security things work, is you are either importing a library or calling out to their API as a proxy before sending any LLM queries through as a way to look for sensitive data aliasing and all this stuff. And that is still developing a lot, especially in the sense of there was recently a whole discussion, and I know I'm trailing a little bit on this, but with AIM Security, for example, they just published a big report on a specific prompt injection for Microsoft Copilot that could increase the scope of the permissions. And there was a post that someone made saying that, this is just prompt injection. Why do we have to create a different name for it? But I think it's very similar to what happened with OWASP, where every kind of application attack is an injection, right? Like everything that Escape does is based on injecting malicious payloads and seeing something else come out on the other side. And I think we're just early in AI AppSec, where right now we just call that prompt injection. But I think over time we will see specific types of prompt injection that get special categorizations and have special mitigations in place, whether it's permissioning for the AI agent or aliasing certain parts of the command or breaking the context window. Like there's all sorts of smaller nuances that I think will arrive over time, and we're just early in that. And then we didn't even talk about the subset of that, which is like DAST for AI models, where you're testing them with different payloads and seeing what comes out on the other side. Yeah, this stuff is still very early. So like anything else, I think it comes back to the discovery piece of it is what people are really looking for more than anything.
Yeah, I think most of the people, at least in AppSec that I talk to, they don't have a specific 100% detailed program yet in place. They try to figure out how they can cover the most with their existing tools like
Yep.
assess the CA and figure out like how, depending on their specific environment, how they can implement that without necessarily again buying another tool. Or upselling is also sometimes an option, because I know like some large vendors, like you mentioned, Microsoft Copilot, Varonis, for example, is super heavy on that.
Yeah.
They're really good at selling that, because we do like some events with them. And yeah, one of the presentations that they gave on the topic, all AppSec engineers were awed. And you can see that also because they collaborate, as you mentioned, a lot with CISOs and like development partnerships there on this topic, they can actually sometimes build the products that are hopefully helpful, but it's just so early on and so also maybe unclear in a sense. Like if you would have to sum up with existing tools, for example, with existing categories, how would you recommend someone to secure their current AI development?
Yeah, that was something else I tried to do in the report. Like, there's earlier versions of the diagram that I was sharing that are like way too complex for people to try to pick apart. Because in general, within each of these categories, you have incumbents that do a fine job. Like for the DLP use case, most of these people are doing browser plugins or network proxies. And that's the same way that like zero trust networking works, that DLP vendors have worked. So vendors like Netscope, Palo, Zscaler, like these traditional enterprise security people are going to do just fine at sensitive data aliasing, checking if employees are going to places. DLP is good at looking at permissions for files. Like these existing vendors will do a fine job growing into the space. And then on the infrastructure side, you have the CSPM, the CNAP, the ASPM. Like I had Wiz and Sneak there as like representative of those capabilities, but really it was just because otherwise I would have to, zoom in and then you've got like every logo of every ASPM, which is its own thing, and every CNAP vendor. But really it's just about, because they're doing the model discovery, the model testing at a high level. And then on the application security side, it's this weird return of RASP, but then you have the ADR vendors that can do some similar stuff. But then from a testing standpoint, you have DAST and SAST that are able to also do similar things. And so really the way that I tried to put it on a flow chart as far as like when should someone adopt a specific solution or look to partner with a AI security vendor specifically is based on how rapidly your team is deploying sensitive functionalities of these agents. And so if you're just deploying a chatbot, that's a very low risk sort of AI agent usage where you can just use your existing SaaS, DAST, ASPM, whatever, and they're coming out with AI stuff and you'll be fine. But if you're on like the front lines of creating some insane Langflow thing and like training your own models and building crazy like agentic lookups where they're running SQL commands that are like high risk, this is when you might want to look at a more invasive solution that gives you more runtime insights. So to me, the adoption curve just depends on like how aggressively you're adopting high risk AI activities. And honestly, for most people, they're just not there yet. Most people are doing very basic, like look up data from an alert, put it into a context window, and then the user is talking with the bot from that context window. They're not doing like complicated agentic lookups of stuff. So that's why I think for most people, the answer is like, you don't really need an AI security vendor. Yeah.
That's it's not very good for AI security vendors.
Well, that's it. I mean, we're just early on the growth curve, right? Where it's like it goes back to why the practitioner survey was just like, would you use an AI vendor? Maybe. And then the other question that was on there that was super interesting was, is AI the top security concern for this year? There was one yes to that question. Everyone else said no, or they said no, but it will be next year. So everyone is sort of prepared for AI security to be a massive problem. But in order for it to be a massive problem, you need to be using it in a way that's actually risky. And I think a lot of the AI security vendors are just ahead of the curve on most people's implementation of AI at this point is just not that risky. But they're betting that it will be.
I think it's definitely like it's going to be a special definition of exploitability. Actually, I hear more and more, the conversation around it. I think OWASP started a project around like their own dashboard that can help with exploitability from exploitability standpoint. It's actually one of the guests, Mihir Shah, that's been leading this project there. And I think from AI perspective, whether it can give out the sensitive data or not easily, well, That's why maybe chatbots are one of the key concerns. At least that's what I heard among CISOs, for example.
Yeah.
I don't think that much, but that's what CISOs here talked about a lot in San Francisco. What do you think, like, since it's still in discovery phase, do you think build versus buy, that which is like common narrative in cyber, is it going to be different for AI than for applications in general?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think it's more about the demand for the features in the first place for people to even know what they want to do. On the enterprise protection side, it's almost impossible to like build your own because you're probably not going to build like your own network proxy and your own endpoint agent to install on end user devices to see what chatbots they're using and stuff like that. On the application side, I think the main risk would be a lot of developers are still trying to understand themselves how to implement things that they want to implement. So they're using tools like Crew or LangChain to try to implement agentic architectures, and how much it's just like the early AWS days where people didn't really know how much AWS was going to invest in security directly. Like theoretically AWS should be able to like kill the CNAP market, but
Theoretically.
yes, but their UI is like so bad that they can't do it. Even though from a feature standpoint, they technically do everything. So I think we're in a similar point where it's clear that Anthropic and OpenAI are the two like new AWSs as far as like the ones who are powering the compute behind all these applications. And a lot depends on what features they're releasing. Like I remember when I did the OpenAI SDK for agents, as part of that, they have built-in tracing for it. And so just the fact that they do that makes every vendor who provided tracing as their primary differentiator, all of a sudden that doesn't matter anymore. And so a lot of these security concerns are also going to be based on what capabilities those platforms provide, and then by extension, Crew AI, LangChain, Lovable, people who are doing a lot in this space.
Yeah, I think, well, Lovable actually now started implementing the security feature directly. When you press on like release update in the prod, they have like a button right now that test for security immediately, which was not the case a couple of months ago. So it's nice to see that they actually take that feedback seriously. They're just going to be a very different discussion because it's marketers that use those kind of tools, and not developers have that usually have zero security, well, Vanta security training, a video of 5 minutes, and that's basically
Yep.
it quite often, especially in startups. And do you think like will it be disproportionately like will the market be kind of disproportional depending on the region? Because I think I came one of your LinkedIn posts came across one of your LinkedIn posts. I think it was just after the RSA where you mentioned like that the San Francisco companies, especially like being there and talking with them, that they are very developer heavy and security, like they have very specific
Yeah.
security culture, like how much. So they're usually like the adopters of the new technologies. If I go to a new startup that appeared in space, usually people who follow those page are all like my connections from San Francisco. So do you think like the way, because they're located there, because they're so different, they'll also influence differently the kind of AI security tools that will gain traction?
Yeah, I think I don't know how much they influence it as much as sort of get their own tooling. I think a lot of vendors get pushed down certain routes based on the customers that they sign up early. So a lot of people who were good at enterprise security sales, which I'm not, but that's why those companies went into the secure browser space first, which I always thought that was like it's always the most boring part of AI security to me, but it's also because all we're doing is like, oh no, my employee pasted something in ChatGPT, God forbid, like the world's going to collapse or something. But that is what CISOs at enterprises care the most about at right now. So if you're trying to sell a security tool and make money, like you should definitely build this stupid AI browser security thing and sell that. The thing that nobody cares about yet is the runtime application security protection stuff, because people are still even figuring out what that means. If developers still don't fully understand how they're going to architect AI solutions, it's hard for a security vendor to come in and say, here's how to secure this thing your developers don't even know they're building yet. It's like just ahead of the curve. But when it comes to that like San Francisco sort of crowd, it just comes down to like the sort of features you develop. And I think SemGrep's my like go-to example for this, where you have such a granular rules creation engine to heavily tweak and customize everything in your static code analysis. But I can't imagine that adoption of those features outside of the developer marketplace is very high. So if you're a retail company, if you're a manufacturing company, you're probably not sitting there tweaking semgrep rules all day. Like you're happy the thing works and scans the thing because you're operating at such a scale. Yeah, and it's a different sort of problem where it's like an economy of scale problem more than it is a I want the most granular API and customization solutions.
Yeah, I think usually it's also the priorities problem
Yeah.
sometimes as well, because they quite often the teams are security teams are smaller too, and you have to prioritize. Like you can't also spend the whole day writing custom security tests for sure. But like say I talked with someone from application security engineer at Salesforce. He told like I literally pop up some grab office every other week to give them feedback on what can be done better. I think that proximity with their ICP definitely helps to improve like direct product into the way that they want, because they're positioning now, I think, AI native AppSec engineer or something like that.
Yes, but that's it's so annoying. Like this is why that's of course the part of the report that was the smallest that people focus the most on is just because it's like I received a few angry messages of like, oh, you excluded us. Have you? It's like I'm not constantly refreshing your homepage over the last 2 months to see how you've like slapped AI on top of everything, because I really focus on like the core capabilities of the platform, and I guarantee you those haven't changed over the last 3 months. And so I didn't ingest your AI landing page enough to put it in the report or something. Like I don't. Yeah, it's an insane thing, and everyone. It's so meaningless. Is the thing that really kills me about it is like we're AI ASPM or we're AI SAST or AI engineer. Like okay, like it literally means nothing. Where the only way I've seen it be successful is people who pivot into it to create a better acquisition story, because no one wants to, like, it's just a way to say this is how X big company is investing in AI by buying this AI solution, even when it's been an AI solution for like 3 months or something.
Yeah, I think a lot of vendors got a new positioning within the past month. I think Sneak also, they because I looked at their land. Actually, I
Yeah,
do. That's part of to look at the list at in the competition market, what positioning they have and what they use, and like a lot started like, well, at least Sneak Trust AI at full speed, AI generated codes, the AI native, like the whole page is now
yeah.
AI, and like probably think it is because their investors somehow also push them to do, and the leadership. And
It's important, because I highlighted Sneak in the report as a means of talking about the features that they're releasing. It's just that it's not like it's a different company now. It's like they support ML bomb scanning now, and there's a few little MCP server type stuff and MCP guardrail type things happening. But it's not like this total company pivot into what's AI. And like I think that's the marketing getting ahead of the product features, because people really, the pitch from vendors is, wow, there's a lot of hype and money in this AI stuff. What if we had some of that? And it has nothing to do with end users or who's using the product and how it's improving their life. It's purely like maybe you're Googling AI security.
yeah, I think sometimes we do get like feedback of someone who's I do believe like in AI powered desk like that, because they want to see that it actually works versus a lot of vendors on the market, and that's where it's sometimes relevant. But it's again like at least my opinion, it's end to the final goal. It just does help to sometimes increase the interest in the tool. That's why, for example, some solutions who are now doing like offensive security with AI, pen test with AI, they kind of sell that vision of accelerated pen test on steroids or something like that, and just it's way to represent that
Well,
portion.
that's it's so there is that in the report trying to highlight like the AI native approach, which is more like an interesting early stage thing than anything that's like a clear massive benefit. So like someone like Maze, who's looking at individual CVs and then having an agent go and do the full research step along the way, that creates, it's like a different paradigm for thinking about false positives. where normally when you have a tool trying to do false positives, they're doing reachability analysis, they're doing attack path analysis, they're doing EPSS and KEV and looking at all of these different factors together and then combining that data to try to guess at the prioritization of something. Whereas if you have an agent do it, you can have it actually look up CV by CV, like here are the conditions under which this is exploitable, and then let me go test if it's exploitable. The challenge is just no one's really doing that at scale yet, and it's such a different way to architect an application that I think it's still unclear how what those tools should even feel like to use and how they're actually helpful. Yeah, because it's just such a different way of doing things that has pros and cons to it. Like the pros are that theoretically it can create better results. The con is for now it's probably going to create more confusing and hallucinated and weird results. And so the bet on those vendors is that they'll be able to figure it out. And that's what executives and VCs love doing, which is why they love investing in AI, is they're just betting like, wow, if it's this good and it's gotten better, it's just look how much better it's going to get. And I think that's an okay investment strategy. It's just as someone who tries to help people buy security tools right now, it's still a little unclear why that's immediately helpful for people.
How would you evaluate, for example, the quality of AI implemented, within the vendor? Because quality, I think, and sometimes whether it's from privacy standpoint, it's valid because it's one of the topics, for example, we get a lot of questions on. And yeah, I had to research it because we get a lot of questions. So I came across one of the HubSpot pages that they
Yeah.
built. Yeah, but the tool that I sent you with like all the data flows and all the Q&A section, because it's still like people want to know whether it's something that's first built natively or an open API, wrapper on the top, how you're using data, where your server is allocated for all of those API powered features, etc. So how would you evaluate that when you're looking at the vendor page?
Well, first of all, that tells you the kinds of security products that are good to build. It is like the one that helps you surface like random privacy information that's like total made up whatever. Like, oh, here's our risk of GPT-03. Like, oh wow, it's the same as 4.0 because it's the same thing. It's just not there's more to the security industry than the things that increase security. And I think that's a great example of it, where the compliance concerns are probably higher for a lot of people. And then you're not the first person to bring up this point, where when you talk about AI features, you're usually just inviting people to ask about, where's the model going? Oh, we have data controls over what models are allowed to ingest our data. Personally, like this is such a short-lived concern that it's hard for me to care about. Again, if I'm trying to sell a security tool right now, it is a concern right now. So it's a good thing to like build and sell things for. It's just, it's a trust issue where there was a time with cloud adoption where those were also very pertinent questions people ask in terms of, where's my data getting stored? Is it in AWS? What region is it on? Like, it's part of my high availability structure. Are you multi-cloud? Do you have a multi-cloud tenant? Like, these things still came up, but I think they come up less and less as people grow to trust AWS, GCP, Azure services. And I think right now people are just highly fixated on not trusting OpenAI and Anthropic that much yet. And so people are concerned about that, and they want the ability to plug in their own API key and own some of their data. But over time, as the architectures get a little more figured out and implicit trust goes up, I just don't think it's going to be as much of a concern. Yeah.
I think funnily enough, we get more and more questions, not less and less.
Well, that's, I think,
because of the scale, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's purely as people, because right now security teams are coming up with policies for it. Like, I didn't cover this in the report because I think it's boring, but like this is probably the biggest, most immediate market. And like this is a lot of the AI TRISM category is around like tools to help you do governance. And so it's stuff like, what policies do we want to use? What compliance frameworks do we need to adhere to? What we need to map and tag where our data is going. And as people make those policies, then it becomes a checkbox to a security team when they're evaluating vendors. Like, oh, we have to get what models you're using, where the data's going, how it's getting stored, and all that stuff. I just mean from an actual security perspective, I just don't like, what's the risk? Like, I could if I gave all of Latio's code to Escape and then Escape puts it into ChatGPT, like, who cares?
I mean, I can go on the front end, I can literally go right now and take the code.
That's what I mean. I just don't, it's just not a concern to me. But it just goes to like a lot of security sales is built on fear and uncertainty, and there's plenty of that with AI models. I've always thought when it comes to giving people access to your code, I've always thought like there's no better way to slow down your competition than to give them your code base and try to have them copy you. Like especially now that AI is a thing, like people tend to think way too highly of their code unless they're a specific like SaaS patented Silicon Valley thing where they legitimately invented some algorithm, whatever. Like your little website thing is not, some great blessing to the earth and how you've built certain functions. But beyond that, even if I do care about that stuff, I don't think there's any inherently large risk about OpenAI is going to take that code and then even if they do store it, they're storing it in a vector database. And like it's not, it's almost like they would have to intentionally make it leak private data for it to work that way. I think a lot of CISOs got this idea that at some point, if you didn't turn it on, I could just ask like, how many customers does Escape have and how much revenue do they have or something like that. But that's just not how the training works, and it's not a real security concern, I don't think.
I don't think so either. It's usually the security concern when it comes to really intellectual property. Then it can be an option, I think, just on a general code base that's not maybe intellectual property, that's patented, etc. Then it's just the way usually technical people approach their work. Sometimes, like I think one time one guest says, yeah, developers are divas. So which is kind of sometimes can be the case that the technical side of things feels more important, but at the end it's all about how well you can position yourself, how well you can develop the message, how well you can resonate with people. And sometimes I think in cybersecurity, marketing gets underestimated in the sense that people think about marketing as something very in the traditional sense, like ads, etc., while it's no longer anymore the...
No, that's the longer I've been doing this, the more clear that's the reality. Is in security more than any other industry, it shouldn't be a surprise that like buying is done by trust, and ultimately buying decisions get made by all these creepy like CISO Slack or WhatsApp channel, and they're all talking crap and they're all advisors, customers/advisors. But it's more about, even beyond the relational piece, it's about creating that wide scale trust with the industry, because most security teams just don't fully know what's even out there, which was the goal of creating Latio in the first place. Is I saw a lot of buying decisions were just based on, oh, Palo's got a big brand, and so surely their product's good. And then once I've used a bunch of CNAPs, I was like, oh, this is not the best CNAP that's out there. And so the goal is to try to help people make decisions a little bit more objectively. But at the end of the day, the mass market for cybersecurity is totally based on trust that partnering with this vendor is going to offset some specific risk that I have, whether that's a compliance checkbox or a technical risk. The marketing is what creates the trust more than anything else. So congratulations. You are in control.
It should be. Yeah, I think it's sometimes indeed a bit hard to create trust versus a very large organizations that just out there and have huge networks and especially like so much works for the partners, etc. But it's very nice that it's also at the same time relationship based and not to just trying to kind of...
I do think there's an interesting trade-off where people are very willing to go into 3-year long agreements and longer term relationships, because even with startups, people do view it more of a partnership than some specific transactional, the way you might look at like a CRM platform or something where it's, I'm not creating a relationship with HubSpot to develop how CRM works. But with Escape, for example, if I'm a company with a specific architecture and like you support some of it but not some other parts of it, like it's more of a long-term understanding partnership, because so much of what security is doing is understanding that we're on the front lines of like some new technology, and that Palo's not going to help you improve your GraphQL security, or like Tenable's DAST is not going to be a major, GraphQL disruptor. It really is. That's what creates the trust and the partnership to tackle this stuff over time. And to bring it back to the AI security report, like that's how most of these AI security companies develop, is that they've created that whole trusted partnership idea that unfortunately is also sort of detached from the technical requirements of what they do.
Yeah, but maybe it could be a good advice for the companies to create a partnership with people who are both on a high level, people who are also technical and practitioners using the day-to-day, and get feedback from several levels what's important for them, and iterate on a product. Maybe not select just one vendor out there, one partner out there, but several, to see also like in what different directions what people ask for the most, and build products that are actually like useful for their target, and useful for organizations on whole as a whole that they're selling to, which is sometimes not an easy feat to do. So maybe to sum up, our conversation, what would be the advice that you could give for security teams and for vendors, for both categories that you're trying to well, on one side include and another side help with Latio, like how to move beyond all the hype around AI and actually build AI security tool and that delivers measurable value.
Yeah, I think practitioners are not making a ton of mistakes yet on this stuff because it's so new that most of them are not rushing to adopt some of these solutions. I think the advice on the practitioner side would more be like on the CISO side, where they're just sort of like in this AI panic that's being driven by executives and then looking for their own AI story. And to that, I would say there are ways to have an AI story with your existing tools where you probably don't need to rush out and buy an AI security tool in order to create that story. And then on the vendor side, it's just about creating clear usage stories. Instead of saying we use AI, trying to actually show the value of why someone would care about that. I'll give a small example. When I was at RSA, I did a CISO connections thing that Wiz was at, and Wiz showed off their MCP integration. And at this point, I've seen like 15 of these things. Yes, I just like don't care. But there were like audible gasps from CISOs in the room of just like asking Cursor, show me my issues. And then it like goes and looks it up and like, oh, wow, this is incredible. And so it's the show aspect of that that's important, where it's because they're not just saying we use AI, but it's showing an actual demonstration of like, end to end, I just ran this fix, or I discovered this issue using Claude or Cursor. Even there's a level of detail there that a lot of people miss, where it's like they might not even realize that it only works in Claude and Cursor for the most part. Like ChatGPT technically supports it now, but whatever. Yeah, to just actually connect with the audience and show them, here's how this makes your life better, and here's an actual workflow that helps people. I think that's the main thing missing from the vendor side. And then to back up to the practitioners, because I know I'm saying you probably don't need an AI security tool, but then the advice is to make sure you're picking one that is actually relevant to you. And that's where I really split between most vendors really are focused on either the DLP, like browser protection use case, or the application use case, and figure out where your risk is primarily. And if I was buying AI security solutions right now at like an enterprise, I would really want two different solutions. I would want one for the AppSec side, and I would want one for the DLP side. I wouldn't really want them connected.
Why not?
Just because the two use cases have like nothing to do with each other. I don't think there's the security rules for make it so Alexandra can't upload sensitive customer information in the ChatGPT. That rule has nothing to do with make sure that an end user can't type a social security number into my AI agentic application. The only reason they're connected is because security teams don't want to buy two tools. They're not connected by anything logical between the capabilities. And this is how we ended up with CNAP. Of just like, oh, well, vendor, I just want to buy one tool. And so CNAP exists. And I just always push back on that and say, like, it depends on your architecture. If you have a zero trust, if you already use zero trust, you probably don't need the browser side stuff. If you don't already use it, then yeah, then it's an investment you might want to make. On the AppSec side, if you're not using agentic architectures, you probably don't need like a runtime AppSec AI solution. If you are and it's accessing highly sensitive data, then it's worth looking into. But those two, like, what's the weird cross section of vendors who like don't have a zero trust solution but care a lot about end user AI security, but then also are using agentic architectures and like want those rules to connect somehow? Like, I just don't, it just seems, when you actually think about it from like a use case perspective, it doesn't make a lot of sense to like buy them from the same person, because they're just totally detached use cases.
And probably in the future there will be another tool that will connect.
That's right. Well, this is what's scary about it's like watching CNAP unfold before my eyes, and I can't do anything about it, because when Palo has the zero trust stuff, and then they bought Protect AI, which was focused on the AppSec scanning side. And so clearly the thing to do is to create an AI app that is a CNAP equivalent that's like this all-in-one AI security thing, and that will probably happen. Gartner will probably create a term for whatever Paolo's doing, and then we'll end up back in this CNAP nightmare, but this time it'll be AI stuff.
I mean, there is a lot of talk starting about AI governance, AI security. That's all, at least by some I listened to by someone from Microsoft, which is also like large organization. So that's where potentially it will be headed or a part of it. So for this season, I have one question, the new one that I didn't ask before, and I'm asking all my guests to answer it. So what's your least favorite security buzzword and why?
And after this conversation, it's AI Trism, I guess. Before that, I would always say like C10. I always found very annoying, and like attack surface management and all that stuff, because it's just vulnerability management, but we just kept creating more ways to call it different stuff, even though that's all it is. So I'll stick with that because I still find it annoying. But it's less of a hot category because most of the people in that category have been acquired at this point.
Okay, makes sense. I think there are still a lot of vendors out there, but is that any category in cyber? Well, thank you so much, James, for coming on the podcast and opening this new season. It's definitely you had some sayings that some people are not gonna be happy about, but well, we're here for hot takes, so that's great. So thank you so much.
Of course, thank you for having me.